Welcome back. This is the 50th segment out of 63 in our series Because It's True, making the case for Christianity in bite-sized pieces. The existential question of morality seems to me to be twofold. First, how do you explain moral convictions? Someone says, I feel that slavery is wrong. Or, I feel that helping the poor is the right thing to do. Well, how have you come to that conclusion? How have you reached that position of personal conviction? Secondly, is the question, how do you explain moral obligations? If someone were to say, I feel that slavery is wrong and you ought to feel the same way, or I feel that it's right to help the poor, and you ought to have that same sense of rightness that I do. Well, how have you reached the conclusion that someone ought to share the same moral convictions that you have? Now, the first can be very subjective. It's what you yourself have decided for any number of reasons. But the second, as soon as you begin to place upon another person a moral obligation, then that requires an objectivity. That requires you to assume that there is, in fact, a transcendent order of moral absolutes, a standard which not only applies to you, but applies to this other person as well. Now, Christianity is going to come alongside every other religion and maintain that, yes, indeed, in the universe there is a moral standard that is transcendent and applicable to each and every person. Now, there will be some disagreement as to what the particulars are to that moral standard, but they're going to maintain that there is a moral standard. However, if you look at secularism or naturalism or atheism, and I'm using those three words synonymously, secularism calls people to be good, beckons people to be good without God, without a transcendent standard. Now, let me say right quickly. People can be good without God. People can be good without affirming the existence of God. I've known and I know people who are atheists who are very moral people. But the question is still there, and that is, how do you reach that conclusion of some moral conviction? And if you say that it is a moral conviction that ought to be shared by others, on what basis do you make that claim if in fact there is no transcendent standard? Now, three answers are usually offered. One is evolution. That the process of evolution has brought us to a place communally with the human race that says that certain things ought to be and certain things ought not to be. Well, of course, the problem there is that The first rule of evolution is that the strong overcome, even kill the weak. The praying mantis can be awfully brutal and cruel, and what's to say that I should necessarily find a moral requirement not to act like the praying mantis? A second response is, well, it's in your best interest. This is a pragmatic answer. It's in your best interest to live this way. So then my motivation for living a certain way is selfish. But if selfish is my standard, who's to say that what I find pleasing and fulfilling, which may mean taking advantage of you in a variety of ways, is wrong? And then a third is a social consensus. Communally, we share the same moral principles. Well, that doesn't work either, because social consensus said that you should slaughter the Jews. Social consensus in China currently is saying all sorts of things that I disagree with morally. So these three explanations that the secularist offers just don't hold water. Listen, moralities, and there are moralities that we know inherently are there. We know within ourselves that certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and you know, the sex trafficking of children is wrong, and the list could go on and on. Moralities that we know are there make more sense if there is a God than if there is not a God. So if you compare secularism and religion, one would have to say that religion just makes more sense as far as the human experience is concerned. But then, as I said earlier, there are the moral guidelines of different religions that differ from other religions. Now, which one then most realistically addresses the complex issues of human nature, the complexities of interpersonal relationships? Well, it'll come as no surprise that I'm going to say of them all, Christianity best addresses these issues. Morality for the Christian, when you shuck it down to the cob, is love God and love others. And the Bible then provides an immeasurably more comprehensive and nuanced understanding. And out of that understanding, counsel as to how we are to grow in our love for God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And how we are to then love our neighbors as ourselves. You line them up. Secularism, the other religious worldviews alongside Christianity, and if you'll look, if you'll examine, if you'll scrutinize, I'm convinced Christianity is much more livable